Ever feel like you're drowning in information,
Yeah.
wanting to really get to the bottom of things, but just not having the time to wade through mountains of books and articles?
Yeah, absolutely. You're looking for those aha moments, but without the information overload, it can be a tricky balance.
It really is. And that's exactly why we do these deep dives, right? We take what you send us, the books, the articles, the key ideas, and we really dig in.
We go deep so you don't have to, giving you those insights without the mental exhaustion.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, you sent us excerpts from The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Talk about a classic in the world of personal and professional development.
It really is a foundational work. And what we're going to try to do today is go beyond the surface, really unpack the shifts in thinking that the author, Stephen Covey, advocates for.
Right, because we're not just looking for quick fixes.
Yeah.
We want to understand how to achieve lasting success, the kind that really makes a difference in our lives, both personally and professionally.
Absolutely. And one of the most powerful ideas in the 7 Habits is the distinction between two approaches to effectiveness: the personality ethic and the character ethic.
Okay, so right off the bat, those terms might sound a bit, well, academic, but trust me, they have a huge impact on how we navigate our lives and our relationships.
For sure. So let's start with the personality ethic. This approach really emphasizes those outward aspects.
Like how you present yourself, your charm, your social skills.
Exactly. It's about the techniques you use, your communication style, your ability to influence others, even cultivating a positive attitude. The idea is that by polishing these external elements, you can become more successful, more persuasive, more, well, effective.
Okay, I'm getting that. But the source material jumps right into a scenario that shows where this can go wrong.
Oh, right. It describes someone who, has really cultivated this forceful personality, someone who can usually steer the conversation, whose ideas tend to carry the most weight.
But underneath, there's this nagging sense of
Unease. This question of whether people are just agreeing because of the personality, not the substance. Are they genuinely persuaded or just kind of going along with it?
So the insight here is that even if you achieve certain outcomes, you might be missing out on something much deeper.
Exactly. Genuine connection, real trust, authentic relationships, it becomes about superficial influence rather than deep-seated respect and understanding.
And I think that leads perfectly into the next example that the source provides. The author's own challenges with his son, who was struggling in school.
Right, he wasn't doing well academically, socially, athletically, kind of a tough time all around. And initially, the parents' response was very much rooted in that personality ethic.
Lots of positive reinforcement. You can do it, pep talks. Trying to change his attitude, his behavior. They even stepped in to try and manage external situations, like when other kids were teasing him. But what was the outcome of all that?
Well, despite the best intentions and all the effort, there wasn't any lasting improvement. The struggles continued, and maybe even more importantly, the son's self-esteem took a real hit.
I can see how that would happen, feeling like you're not measuring up, despite everyone telling you that you can. It's a recipe for self-doubt.
Exactly. And this experience became a real turning point for Stephen Covey. He was also working with IBM executives at the time, developing programs on communication and perception. And all of this led him to a pretty fundamental realization about how we see the world.
Which brings us to this idea of paradigms, right?
Exactly. Think of a paradigm as your mental map, your operating system, the lens through which you interpret everything around you. It's your deep-seated assumptions about how things work, about yourself, about other people.
And the source uses this brilliant analogy of a map. If I'm trying to navigate a new city, a good map is essential. But if I'm using the wrong map,
you could be the most positive person, the most determined, the most energetic, but you'll still end up lost. And that's exactly what happens when we focus solely on tweaking our attitudes and behaviors, the personality ethic, without addressing those underlying paradigms.
So it's like trying to navigate Paris with a map of London. No amount of positive thinking is going to get you to the Eiffel Tower.
Exactly. And that's where the limitations of the personality ethic become really clear. It's about surface changes, but it doesn't address the root cause, the fundamental map we're using to navigate our lives.
Okay, I'm with you so far. So the author then introduces this idea of primary versus secondary greatness. Primary greatness is about your character, those fundamental principles, your integrity. Secondary greatness is more about your personality, your skills, your techniques, your style. What's the essential difference here?
The key distinction is that while those secondary traits can be valuable, they are, well, secondary. They lack a solid, lasting foundation if they're not built upon a bedrock of strong character.
It's like building a house on sand versus building it on solid ground.
Exactly. And the source uses another great analogy: cramming for an exam versus truly mastering the material. You might get a passing grade by cramming, but you haven't really learned anything.
Right. And there's that farming analogy. You can't just magically wish for a bountiful harvest if you haven't put in the work of planting and cultivating, the law of the harvest, right?
Yeah.
You reap what you sow.
Precisely. And that applies directly to our relationships. You can't just suddenly try to be super charming or use a manipulative technique and expect a deep, trusting connection to appear. It takes time, effort, and genuine character.
So the real message here is that in the long run, it's your character that communicates most eloquently. Who you are shines through, no matter what techniques you try to use.
As Emerson said, "What you are shouts so loudly in my ears that I cannot hear what you say."
Powerful quote. So if these quick fixes of the personality ethic have these inherent limitations, what's the alternative?
That's where the character ethic comes in, and this is where those 7 habits are rooted. They're not just random tips or tricks. They're based on these universal, timeless principles of effectiveness.
Principles like fairness, integrity, honesty, human dignity, service, growth. These aren't just nice ideas. They're fundamental laws of human interaction, like gravity.
Exactly. And when we start aligning ourselves with these principles, we experience what the author calls a paradigm shift, a fundamental change in how we see and understand the world.
Okay, so the character ethic is a different kind of map, more accurate map. And what's the impact of using this new map?
The source suggests that this shift in thinking, this alignment with correct principles, has a far greater impact than just trying to change our behavior on the surface.
It's getting to the root of the issue, changing the underlying operating system.
Exactly.
Okay.
But the challenge is that the personality ethic can be very seductive. It promises quick fixes, easy solutions, immediate results. The source calls it the glitter of the personality ethic. It's like those get-rich-quick schemes.
Promising the rewards without the real work.
Precisely. And Eric Fromm, the social psychologist, had this interesting observation about the automaton individual.
The automaton, what does that mean?
It's someone who's so focused on external expectations, on playing the role they think they're supposed to play, that they lose touch with their true selves, their authentic core.
They become almost robotic in their interactions.
In a way, yes. And this can be a real consequence of getting too caught up in the personality ethic.
Another really important point the source makes is this idea of sequential growth. You can't skip essential stages of development, like a child learning to walk.
Right. They have to crawl before they can walk, walk before they can run. You can't just skip to the end.
So how does that apply to our discussion of effectiveness?
This principle applies across the board, whether it's learning a new skill, building a strong relationship, or developing our character. There are natural processes of growth that we can't bypass.
Like trying to play the piano at a concert level without years of practice.
Exactly. Or thinking you can become a CEO overnight without any leadership experience. These things take time, effort, and a willingness to progress through the necessary stages.
So to sum up this first part, it really seems like the key takeaway is that focusing solely on outward techniques and quick fixes without addressing our underlying paradigms and character is, well, it's a recipe for frustration and limited results.
It's like trying to change the fruit on a tree without tending to the roots. You might get some temporary changes, but it won't be sustainable.
So what's the alternative? How do we move beyond this limited thinking? The source suggests that the answer lies in adopting an inside-out approach. What does that mean?
It means starting with ourselves, our own paradigms, our character, our motives. The source emphasizes this idea: the way we see the problem is the problem.
So it's not about trying to change other people or external circumstances first.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our own perceptions, our own ways of thinking, are often the biggest obstacle. Einstein had a great quote about this. He said, "The significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them."
So we need a new level of thinking, a higher level of thinking, and that's what the inside-out approach offers.
Right. It's a more principle-centered, character-based way of approaching challenges. The source gives a few really good examples to illustrate this.
Like the manager who's struggling with employee loyalty.
Right. Instead of just focusing on new motivational techniques or blaming the employees, the inside-out approach would encourage that manager to ask, what am I doing that might be contributing to this lack of loyalty? Are my own assumptions and behaviors creating a culture of distrust?
Or the person who feels constantly stressed and overwhelmed despite trying all the latest time management strategies.
The inside-out approach would prompt them to examine their underlying paradigms about time, responsibility, and their own well-being. Are they saying yes to too many things? Are they sacrificing their health and relationships for the sake of external demands?
And what about the couple struggling with a flat marriage?
Instead of just looking for communication exercises or date night ideas, the inside-out approach would encourage each partner to ask, what are my own paradigms about marriage and love? How am I contributing to the current dynamic? What can I do differently to make the relationship better, regardless of what my partner does?
So it's not about waiting for the other person to change first. It's about taking responsibility for our own part in the situation.
Exactly. And this leads us to another crucial principle. Private victories precede public victories.
Meaning
That we have to work on ourselves first.
Yeah.
We have to build that inner foundation of self-mastery before we can truly build effective and lasting relationships with others.
It's about getting our own house in order before trying to redecorate someone else's.
Exactly. And that's why the first 3 habits are so foundational. They're about self-mastery. They're about achieving independence.
And once we have that solid foundation, we can move towards interdependence.
Which is really about recognizing that we can achieve far more together than we ever could alone. But, as the source points out, interdependence is a choice that only independent people can make.
If you're not secure in yourself, if you're not self-reliant, your relationships can become based on neediness and control.
Right. It becomes about trying to get something from the other person rather than genuinely contributing and collaborating.
So this inside-out approach is really a paradigm shift. It's a completely different way of seeing the world and approaching our challenges.
And it's not always easy. The outside-in paradigm is so pervasive, it's all around us.
It's the default setting for most people. Blaming others, feeling like a victim of circumstance, waiting for someone else to change first.
And as the source suggests, this kind of thinking can keep us stuck in cycles of conflict and frustration.
Okay, so how do we start putting this inside-out approach into practice?
Yeah.
This is where the 7 habits come in as practical tools for building a more effective life, starting from the inside out.
Exactly. They provide a roadmap for developing those essential character traits and principles that lead to lasting success.
And to tie this all together, there's this really powerful concept called the PPC balance. The source illustrates this with the metaphor of the goose and the golden egg.
Ah, yes, a classic. So the golden eggs represent the desired results, the production, the P, and the goose represents the asset that produces those results, the PC, the production capability.
So the goose could be your health, your relationships, your skills, your reputation, your company, your resources, anything that produces the things you want.
Precisely. And the key insight here is that if we focus solely on getting the golden eggs, on maximizing production in the short term, without taking care of the goose, we'll eventually deplete the very source of our effectiveness.
We'll kill the goose that lays the golden eggs.
Exactly. It's like running a machine in a factory 24/7 without any maintenance. Eventually, it's going to break down.
And the source provides some great examples of this principle in action, both in personal and professional settings.
Like the father who's trying to teach his daughter to share at her birthday party. He's so focused on the P, the immediate teaching moment, that he neglects the PC, the emotional atmosphere, the relationship with his daughter.
And as a result, his attempts to teach fall flat. The daughter feels pressured and resentful, and the lesson is lost.
Right. It shows how important it is to consider the PC, the relationship, the emotional context, when trying to achieve the P, the desired outcome.
Another example is the restaurant that cuts corners on quality to increase profits in the short term, but ends up damaging its reputation and losing customers in the long run.
Exactly. They're sacrificing the PC, the trust and loyalty of their customers, for the sake of short-term P profit. And ultimately, they harm the very asset that produces those profits.
And this principle applies to our own lives as well. If we consistently burn the candle at both ends, neglecting our health and well-being, we might achieve some temporary productivity, but eventually we'll burn out.
Absolutely. We'll deplete our own PC, our physical and mental resources, and our ability to produce those golden eggs. Our effectiveness will suffer.
So the PPC balance is really a fundamental principle for effectiveness in all areas of life. It's about recognizing that we need to take care of the goose if we want a steady supply of golden eggs.
It's about sustainability. It's about long-term thinking. It's about understanding that true effectiveness comes from nurturing the source of our production, not just exploiting it.
Okay, let's dive into the habits themselves, starting with habit 1. Be proactive. What does it mean to be proactive?
At its core, proactivity is about recognizing that we have the power to choose our response, regardless of external circumstances. It's about taking responsibility for our own lives, our own choices, our own actions.
So it's not about just reacting to whatever life throws at us.
Exactly. Reactive people tend to feel like they're victims of circumstance. They blame others, they complain, they feel powerless.
The source even talks about the language we use. Reactive people use phrases like, I can't, I have to, if only.
Whereas proactive people use language like, I can, I will, I choose. It's a subtle but powerful shift in mindset.
The source also uses Viktor Frankl's experience in the Nazi death camps as a powerful illustration of proactivity.
Right. Even in those horrific circumstances, Frankl recognized that he still had the power to choose his attitude, his response. He couldn't control what was happening to him, but he could control how he reacted to it.
That's incredibly inspiring. And then there's this idea of the circle of concern and the circle of influence.
These are really helpful tools for understanding proactivity. The circle of concern includes all the things we care about: our health, our relationships, our work, global events, other people's opinions. The circle of influence is smaller. It includes the things we can actually do something about.
So proactive people focus their energy on their circle of influence, on the things they can control.
Exactly. They work on themselves, they set goals, they take action, and as they do, their circle of influence often expands.
But reactive people tend to focus on their circle of concern, worrying about things they can't control, which just leads to more stress and a sense of helplessness.
And the source gives a great example from the Old Testament, the story of Joseph. Despite facing incredible challenges of being betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, unjustly imprisoned, he never gave up his proactive stance.
He focused on what he could control: his own attitude, his own integrity, his own willingness to contribute. And eventually he rose to a position of great influence.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the most difficult circumstances, we still have the power to choose our response.
And that's really the essence of proactivity. So what are some practical ways we can start being more proactive in our daily lives?
One of the most effective ways is to focus on making and keeping commitments. Start small, make a promise to yourself and keep it. Make a promise to someone else and follow through.
It could be something as simple as making your bed every morning or calling a friend you haven't spoken to in a while.
Exactly. It's about building that muscle of proactivity, of taking control of our choices and our actions.
Okay, moving on to habit 2. Begin with the end in mind. What's this habit all about?
Habit 2 is about having a clear vision of where you want to go before you start your journey. It's about defining your destination, your goals, your values.
So it's like planning a trip. You wouldn't just get in the car and start driving without knowing where you want to go.
Exactly. The source describes this in terms of 2 creations: the mental creation, the blueprint, and the physical creation, the actual building.
So if you're building a house, you need a detailed plan before you start laying bricks.
Precisely. You need to envision the finished product. Consider all the details. Think about the purpose of each round. Make sure it aligns with your overall vision.
And this principle applies to all areas of life, not just building houses.
Absolutely. Whether it's your career, your relationships, your personal growth, your contributions to the world, if you don't have a clear vision, a guiding purpose, you're likely to end up somewhere you didn't intend to be.
You'll be at the mercy of external circumstances and other people's agendas.
And that's where the concept of a personal mission statement comes in.
What is a personal mission statement and why is it so important?
It's essentially your personal constitution. It articulates your core values, your deepest beliefs, your definition of success, your goals, your aspirations, the kind of person you want to be, the kind of legacy you want to leave behind.
It's like a compass that guides your decisions and actions.
Precisely. And the source suggests some pretty powerful exercises for developing your personal mission statement, like imagining your own funeral.
That sounds a bit morbid.
It might seem that way, but it's actually a very effective way to connect with your core values and your long-term perspective.
By imagining what people would say about you, the kind of impact you would want to have had, you can gain clarity on what truly matters to you.
It helps you separate the trivial from the essential, the fleeting from the enduring.
And how can we use tools like visualization and affirmation to help us begin with the end in mind in our daily lives?
Visualization is about creating a clear mental picture of yourself, achieving your goals, living in alignment with your values, being the kind of person you want to be. By repeatedly visualizing this ideal scenario, you program your subconscious mind to work towards it.
It's like creating a mental blueprint for your future.
Exactly. And affirmations are positive statements that reinforce your values and your goals. By repeating these affirmations regularly, you internalize them and make them part of your belief system.
So if your goal is to be more patient with your kids, you might create an affirmation like, I am a patient and loving parent.
Exactly. And by repeating that affirmation, you're more likely to act in accordance with it.
The source also makes an interesting distinction between leadership and management in the context of this habit.
Right. Leadership is about defining the end in mind, setting the direction, envisioning the destination. Management is about planning the route, organizing the resources, and making sure things get done efficiently.
So leadership is about the what and the why, while management is about the how.
Precisely. And the key takeaway is that leadership comes first. You need to know where you're going before you can effectively figure out how to get there.
As Stephen Covey says, manage from the left, lead from the right.
Exactly. Engage your right brain, your intuition, your creativity to define the vision, and then use your left brain, your logic and planning skills to make it a reality.
And the source suggests that the fourth human endowment, independent will, is essential for effective self-management. What is independent will, and why is it so important?
Independent will is our capacity to make choices and act on them, even when it's difficult. It's our ability to say yes to our values and our goals and no to distractions and temptations. It's the power to overcome inertia and procrastination and align our actions with our intentions.
It's the foundation of self-discipline and personal integrity.
Absolutely. And without it, we're at the mercy of our impulses and external pressures. We can't effectively manage ourselves, let alone lead others.
Okay, let's move on to habit 3. Put first things first. How does this habit build on the first two?
Habit 3 is about taking those principles of proactivity and beginning with the end in mind and putting them into practice in our daily lives.
It's about prioritizing, time management, organization, execution.
Exactly. And the source introduces a really helpful tool for understanding this habit, the time management matrix.
This matrix divides our activities into 4 quadrants based on their urgency and importance.
Quadrant 1 is urgent and important. These are the crises, the deadlines, the pressing problems that demand our immediate attention.
If you don't deal with these things, there will be immediate negative consequences.
Right, but the problem is that if we spend all our time in quadrant 1, we're constantly in reactive mode, putting out fires.
We never get to the important but not urgent activities that can prevent those fires in the first place.
Which is where quadrant 2 comes in.
Yeah.
These are the activities that are not urgent, but they are incredibly important.
Things like planning, prevention, relationship building, personal development, exercise, learning new skills.
Exactly. These are the activities that contribute to our long-term well-being, our effectiveness, our happiness.
But because they're not urgent, we often neglect them. We tell ourselves we'll get to them later, but later never seems to come.
And then we have quadrants 3 and 4. Quadrant 3 is urgent but not important. These are the interruptions, the distractions, other people's demands that we feel obligated to respond to.
Like checking email every 5 minutes or attending meetings that could have been an email.
Exactly. And quadrant 3 is not urgent and not important. This is the realm of time wasters.
Social media scrolling, binge watching TV, mindless activities that don't contribute to our goals or our well-being.
Precisely. And the key insight of the time management matrix is that effective people spend the majority of their time in quadrant 2. They prioritize those important but not urgent activities that contribute to their long-term goals and their overall effectiveness.
So it's not just about being efficient, it's about being effective, it's about focusing on the right things.
Exactly. And the source outlines 4 key activities for effective quadrant 2 organizing: identifying your roles, selecting goals, scheduling, and daily adapting.
Let's break those down. Identifying your roles is about recognizing the different hats you wear in life: parent, spouse, friend, employee, volunteer, etc.
Selecting goals is about choosing 1 or 2 important goals for each of those roles. What do you want to achieve as a parent, as a spouse, as an employee?
Scheduling is about blocking out time in your week to actually work on those quadrant 2 goals, putting it in your calendar, making it a priority.
And daily adapting is about being flexible, adjusting your plans as needed, but always staying focused on your most important priorities.
The source also provides a great example of shopping center managers who shifted their focus from enforcement to empowerment.
Right. Instead of just focusing on enforcing rules and regulations, they started proactively working with their tenants to help them succeed.
They provided support, resources, training. They invested in the PC, the production capability of their tenants, and as a result, the entire shopping center thrived.
It's a powerful example of how focusing on quadrant 2 activities can lead to significant positive outcomes.
And a key part of putting first things first is learning to say no to less important demands, especially those in quadrants 3 and 4.
That's right. We have to be proactive about protecting our time and energy for our most important priorities.
And the source describes this as the 4th generation of time management, which is principle-centered. What does that mean?
Earlier approaches to time management focused on efficiency, on doing things right. But the 4th generation is about effectiveness, about doing the right things.
It's about using your personal mission statement as a compass, making sure your actions are aligned with your deepest values and your long-term goals.
And finally, the source briefly touches on delegation as a powerful tool for increasing both P and PC.
By delegating effectively, you empower others to contribute, which frees up your time and energy for those quadrant 2 activities.
And it also develops the skills and capabilities of your team, which enhances their PC, leading to even greater overall effectiveness.
Now we move into the realm of interdependence, and a crucial concept for understanding and building effective relationships. The emotional bank account. What is the emotional bank account?
Think of it as a metaphor for the level of trust and goodwill you have in a relationship. Every interaction either makes a deposit or withdrawal.
So deposits are things like kindness, courtesy, honesty, keeping commitments, listening empathetically, understanding the other person's perspective.
Exactly. These actions build trust, strengthen the connection, create a sense of safety and security.
And withdrawals are things like being rude, disrespectful, breaking promises, betraying trust, being inconsiderate.
Right. These actions damage the relationship, erode trust, and create distance.
And a high emotional bank account makes communication easier and more effective. You have more leeway, more understanding, more forgiveness.
But a low emotional bank account creates tension, defensiveness, and conflict. Even small missteps can trigger a big reaction.
And the source emphasizes that consistent deposits are crucial for maintaining a healthy emotional bank account.
It's like any bank account. If you keep making withdrawals without making deposits, you'll eventually go bankrupt.
So in our relationships, we need to make sure we're making more deposits than withdrawals.
And the source provides some great examples of how this principle plays out in real life.
Like the parents who see their children's mistakes not as problems to be fixed, but as opportunities to connect, teach, and build understanding.
They're making deposits into the emotional bank account.
Or the company that views customer complaints not as annoyances, but as chances to improve their service and build loyalty.
They're recognizing that every interaction is an opportunity to either build or erode trust.
So the emotional bank account is really a fundamental concept for effective interdependence. It's the foundation upon which strong, healthy relationships are built.
It's the key to creating a positive and supportive environment where people feel safe to communicate openly, collaborate effectively, and achieve great things together.
This leads us to habit 4. Think win-win. What's the essence of this habit?
Habit 4 is about approaching all your interactions with a mindset of seeking mutual benefit. It's about finding solutions where everyone feels like they've gained something valuable.
So it's not about one person winning at the expense of the other.
Exactly. The win-lose paradigm is so pervasive in our society. We're often conditioned to believe that for someone to succeed, someone else has to fail.
But the source argues this is a very limited way of thinking.
It creates unnecessary competition, conflict, and resentment, and it often leads to suboptimal outcomes.
So what's the alternative?
The alternative is win-win thinking. It's about recognizing that there are often solutions that can benefit everyone involved.
But how do you find those win-win solutions? It's not always easy.
It takes effort, creativity, and a genuine desire to understand the other person's needs and perspectives. The source suggests that win-win thinking requires 3 essential character traits: integrity, maturity, and an abundance mentality.
Integrity is about being true to your values, being honest and trustworthy.
Maturity is about finding that balance between courage and consideration. Having the courage to express your own views and needs, but also being considerate of the other person's feelings and perspectives.
And an abundance mentality is the belief that there are enough resources and opportunities for everyone. It's the opposite of a scarcity mentality, which leads to competition and hoarding.
Right. An abundance mentality fosters collaboration, generosity, and a willingness to share.
And of course, trust is essential for creating win-win agreements.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Without trust, people will always be looking out for themselves, trying to protect their own interests.
And the source provides a great example of how trying to achieve win-win outcomes with a win-lose mentality just doesn't work. It's like trying to mix oil and water.
And it also emphasizes the importance of aligning organizational systems and structures to support win-win behaviors.
If your reward system is based on individual competition, you're not going to create a culture of collaboration.
Exactly. You need to create systems that encourage cooperation, teamwork, and mutual benefit.
Okay, moving on to habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. What's the key principle here?
Habit 5 is all about empathetic listening. It's about putting aside our own agendas and truly trying to understand the other person's perspective, their feelings, their needs.
And why is understanding emphasized first?
Because it's the foundation of effective communication. You can't build a bridge of understanding if you're not willing to listen first.
The source points out that most of us have received extensive training in speaking, reading, and writing, but very little training in empathetic listening.
We're taught to express ourselves, but not to truly listen.
And as a result, we often approach conversations with the intent to reply, not to understand.
We're already formulating our response before the other person has even finished speaking.
We filter their words through our own biases and assumptions, and we miss the nuances and the underlying emotions.
And the source describes 4 common autobiographical responses that block empathetic listening.
What are those?
Evaluating, judging the other person's thoughts and feelings. Probing, asking questions from our own agenda, not from a genuine desire to understand. Advising, offering solutions before we fully understood the problem. And interpreting, trying to explain the other person's behavior based on our own experiences.
So these are all ways of making the conversation about us, not about the other person.
Exactly. And they all prevent us from truly connecting and understanding.
So what does empathetic listening actually look like?
It involves 4 key skills: mirroring, rephrasing, reflecting, and summarizing.
Mirroring is simply reflecting back the content of what the other person is saying.
Rephrasing is putting their words into your own language to make sure you understand.
Reflecting is acknowledging and validating their feelings.
And summarizing is bringing together the key points of what they've said to ensure you've grasped the essence of their message.
And the source emphasizes that seeking first to understand makes huge deposits into the emotional bank account.
It shows the other person that you value.